From Leawood to Liberty, you're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
Yesterday, Mayor Lucas gave his second to last state of the city in Kansas City. It was at high noon down at City Hall. He now joins us on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Well, I've certainly got some questions for you, Mr. Mayor, but if you could encapsulate that state of the city in less than a minute for those who didn't watch it yesterday, what would you want them to know about your speech yesterday?
Kansas City is investing billions in public safety. You'll see salary increases for fire, for police. You're going to see us continue to invest in housing in Kansas City. And importantly, you're going to continue to see us be a welcoming city for everyone who is here, making sure that it is safe as it possibly can be. So I think it was a speech that brought a lot of people together, a lot of constituencies. Honored to do it yesterday.
All right. Well, obviously, this is just how it goes, but the Royals were obviously talked about by you yesterday. You were very confident. You didn't say, we hope to get a deal done, we plan to get a deal done. You said that we will get a deal done in 2026. I don't believe you would have said that unless you really knew something was about to pop on this. So what can you share with us?
I've said for a long time, the usual line, we've kept talking to them, but I'd like to think that the conversations are continuing to bear fruit. I think the city has discussed a compelling way to ensure the team can stay. We've worked with our state partners. We continue to work with our partners at Jackson County, and I think the team recognizes that as well. So I do not think this is a drama that lasts forever. A few weeks ago, I was popping off about spring training. Obviously, certainly pitchers and catchers have reported, if not everyone. And so I think that we are likely to have real news for you. And I'll say it this way to not make it sound so equivocal, which is you're going to have news one way or the other. And I think it's not going to take that long to know it.
Okay. So what's the over-under now? Maybe opening day? You feel good about that being a soft target?
I have continued to feel like opening day is a good target because, of course, spring training for the most part lasts until opening day. So I gave myself a little cushion in there. But, yeah, I think that we look to have something to share with the people of this community by that point. And I think, frankly, the people of this community deserve it. If there is one thing I have to thank the Kansas legislature for, although they kind of gutted my Christmas week, is putting that December 22nd deadline on the Star Bonds for the Chiefs. I think it helped bring an end to what could have been, long-term conversations that could last for years. And you see it happening right now in Chicago, where the legislatures from Indiana and Iowa are threatening to poach the Chicago Bears. It seems like it's just time for us to resolve Stadium Palooza, and we're going to do our part in Kansas City to resolve it with our exceptional baseball team.
Well, you yesterday talked about this as well in the state of the city, and you were alluding to the Chiefs, but you said, hey, we got to do a better job regionally when it comes to not, poaching across state line. And listen, this has been going on forever. There was a truce between former Governor Parson in Missouri and Governor Kelly in Kansas, and we all know that it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. So
yeah.
What can you really do about that? Because it doesn't seem like there's any end to it.
I think there are a few things. The first of which is somebody in the world has to focus on how do we bring outside forces to our community? How do we bring new companies? And how do we grow companies in our city? So a lot of what the Economic Development Corporation of Kansas City has been doing is how can we invest in small businesses and make sure they grow? If you do that as a lot of your focus, then I think you'll get far. I think another part of it is be realistic. And instead of us, part of the challenge maybe wasn't just the soft truth that was never real. But I think in some ways it was because we spent so much time talking about it. And I don't know if anybody in the real estate community ever believed it. They kind of found every loophole possible or said, oh, this is a local incentive, not a state. This isn't part of the program. This whole industry sector isn't a part of it. I think we just all try to live in the real world. And then I'll say this for a Pete Mundo, the Pat Tuies of the world, and others. I do think we need to recognize that these are taxpayer dollars. I mean, something I noted in my speech yesterday, and I recognize this even when we talk about sports teams, redirections All of these things, they're not magic money, unless we all be confused. This is money that you all pay that someone else will not pay, which means that you will have to ultimately, I hate to be controversial, but pay more for policing, pay more for fire services, pay more for roads. Right? If the NBA comes to Kansas City or even Overland Park tomorrow and they say, oh, yeah, the arena we build or the arena we stay in is all going to be based on redirected money, note, everyone, that all that traffic is on your roads. Those cops who are directing them still work there. The sewers are still being built up to handle it. That has to be paid for by somebody. And look, I mean, I'm playing incentives. I'll articulate that. But we've gotten so far afield from the point, and I see it in my social media comments from people that are like, Q, you needed to pay the Chiefs $3 billion, bro. I'm like, that's money that you will have to pay for public services long term. That's how we get away from this whole border war, battle, whatever. We need to actually just think about, if we have taxes, they should largely be paid. If you're redirecting taxes, you have to have a darn good reason. And a darn good reason isn't moving somebody across the street.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm fine with state competition, but when it comes to these projects, it's not oftentimes about states or cities competing against each other saying, we have the best climate, we've got the best schools, best place to live. It's literally a race to the bottom. It's not about actual competition. It's about who's giving away the most, which is not competition. It's a race to the very bottom. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. And I said this probably 2 years ago going on now, where I said, and yeah, it's self-serving, but it's true, which is that it does no one any good to have a by-state race to the bottom in incentives for sports teams, full stop. And I don't think any taxpayer could say they're in a better position now. Now, look, everybody will say this will be good. It'll lead to secondary or tertiary investment and all of that. But for building the tax base, right, it is very hard to do that when you're just giving huge incentives away. I'll give an example. There was a company, let me move out of sports, and I do think baseball could be good, 81 nights. There's a lot you get out of it. But there's one company where a move was announced. They're moving to State Line Road, Pete. They were leaving one part of Kansas City, fundamentally almost to be in another part of Kansas City. Indeed, they're on the part of State Line Road, even though they'll be in Leawood, that is KCMO maintenance. So the same streets, the same whatever, all that sort of stuff. Almost no one will move. Let me be fair to sports. You could say that at least at a dome, which I don't agree with, but nonetheless, maybe you get, 5 more events a year than you could get at an outdoor stadium. Because to be honest with you, people, not that many acts can fill up a stadium or a dome. But nonetheless, you get a few. But if you're moving an office building where all the people are residents of wherever they are today, where basically you're building so many amenities inside a building that they won't even go out for lunch, what are you doing? And why are you giving away tax incentives? That is probably the biggest question that I have. And I think we have let there be a race to the bottom. And you're seeing the Chicago Bears play it now. Mm-hmm. You're seeing it in businesses all around the country.
Any chance they're doing it to avoid that earnings tax?
I think to your earlier point, yeah, if I was just sitting down, reading the paper and saying, oh, shucks, look, I take all the critiques. I take them in fairness. I said, oh, shucks, this business cited public safety. They cited the earnings tax. They cited, I don't know, a sewer issue. I'd be like, sure. But if there is also going to be linked in the story, oh, yeah, you're getting $150 million redirected to you. It was kind of like, oh, well,
mm-hmm.
I get it. You took the bag.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going to be fair to American business. I'm not going to judge them. If somebody, I love Kansas City, Missouri, don't get me wrong. But if somebody said, hey, Quinton, will you move to the Northland tomorrow from where you live and we're going to give you a free house worth like $600,000 just to live there? I'd be like, hell yeah. And that's kind of what we're doing. And this whole idea is, all right, the incentives exist so you can build up a secondary environment and all the new business things. I think what more of us need to ask, maybe it isn't just incentives bad, which Pat may say, but instead it is, okay, what's the secondary benefit you get out of it? And how is this changing your community fundamentally, particularly well-to-do communities? If I can put something fancy like a giant factory in the Leeds area, which is near Arrowhead Stadium, we'll give incentives for that, right? If some car company called me and said we want to have a giant factory, that makes sense. We haven't been able to drive new development there in like 70 years. But if it's just going to the nicest cream field ever in the middle of somewhere else, yeah, doesn't make sense.
All right. I want to ask you, Mr. Mayor, about speaking of business and business in Kansas City. Of course, this Port KC Platform Ventures potential ICE detention facility continues to get a lot of attention here in town. You've been on the record many places, many times about your push against it. But, as this thing continues to seemingly become a major national political conversation in Kansas City, what have your conversations been with the Platform Venture guys, the Anderson brothers, if anything, as they've been taking all the slings and arrows as just regular Kansas City businessmen doing what could be a very legal transaction as far as I can tell?
I have issues with businesses. I don't tend to talk about the people behind the businesses because I think that can lead to public safety threats, to some other challenges. And so, what I say is this. My beef is with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, I guess ultimately the President of the United States, Congressman Mark Alford, some of the others who support the siting of this location. This week, Sharice Davids added a letter to a letter already sent to Emmanuel Cleaver in opposition to this. And so, I think what we need to share as a community is our opposition to take the steps to be against it. And Lord knows, my God, Port Authority is in the middle of like every news issue in this city right now. But long term for me, no, I'm not here to look up people to have them anywhere on anything. And I think that I'll continue to have my commentary be more broadly on what I find to be misplaced government policy. Because, Pete, I continue to believe wherever you live and wherever I live, I don't want a 10,000 person detention facility across from my house. And I think that's the same for a lot of people who do business in South Kansas City.
Do you have concerns, though, that the way this has been handled, including by some elected officials who have really doxed these individuals, that it's something that could come back to bite Kansas City either short-term and long-term, where people say, that's happening right now with these guys. This could be bad for us or bad for any business going forward.
I have a long-term record about not liking doxing. I got some controversy to my left back in the 2020 protest when you started seeing more of that done towards officers. As someone who's had people show up at my house, I don't want or respect or want to create a pathway for anyone to show up at anybody's house. So, my focus is going to be business. That being said, my job is not to police the activity of every protester, of every person who has something to claim. My biggest threat is, I think, sometimes an out-of-control government. An out-of-control government that shot a guy in the back would look like 10 times. An out-of-control government that's trying to force giant jails into former Amazon distribution facilities. So I'm going to continue to have my beefs with the Homeland Security Secretary and others. I assume the protesters on both sides, the people who are fighting on Facebook, all that sort of stuff, will figure it all out, or if not, they'll use their First Amendment rights to the fullest extent, and hopefully there will be checks where they tend to exceed them.
I want to ask you two more things here. One, the police budget. You offered yesterday a 5% increase on the police budget, about $360 million. Police department wants $420. Listen, I'm going to have the police officers' backs here, but they were at about $250 million a few years ago. You're getting them up to $360. I think most people would say, hey, that's a pretty good spike, 40%, whatever it ends up being over the last few years. But there still are obviously issues on their side where they're saying they can't pay the bills now through the end of this fiscal year. So how does that get resolved?
Well, first of all, we all have to recognize it's lawsuits, right? I mean, it is lawsuits.
Is it though? Because is it really though? Because they're saying it's unfunded pensions over the last 10 plus years.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, look, I think that would be pure malarkey. Sorry to sound like Joe Biden, but no. I mean, included in this budget, we fully fund pensions. To suggest that, there are pension shenanigans in connection with it makes no sense. And indeed, if there were, I have every faith that my friends in organized labor relating to policing would have been down our throats about the number of challenges. Indeed, when I first joined the city council, they were. No, it's how do you absorb like $11 million in lawsuits on a budget that is tightly framed year after year. I mean, that has almost nothing to do with it, in my opinion. I think that what we need to do is find a way to resolve lawsuits, and I have a solution for you today. The Missouri legislature, the conservative Missouri legislature tomorrow, could put caps, particularly on lawsuits against local government jurisdictions. And if you don't want to include Kansas City in it, just make it boards of police commissioners, of which there are only 2 in the state, that says you have a cap at $300,000 or something like that on damages. It would save the police department millions. What my friends in the Missouri legislature don't want to tell you is that they are in bed with the trial lawyers as much as any Democrat is, and that's why that would not have a high likelihood of passage. But we are defunding the Kansas City and St. Louis police departments. Not we. They are defunding and allowing the defunding of policing in Missouri's biggest cities right now because of the liability exposure we continue to have, particularly, I think, in the employment arena. Obviously, a lot of other cases will end up in federal court. I understand that, but I think this is one way we can be protected. It needs to change, or else we'll be in this same budget chat next year, Pete.
Well, you know what? I am 110% on board with that plan, and for whatever reason, you're right. The Missouri Republicans and Democrats are letting the trial attorneys get whatever they want in the state right now, and it's hurting city budgets, and it's not good for the regular folks in Missouri. You're right about that. All right, last thing real quick. Big 12 tournament announces yesterday that they're going to have a glass floor at the women's and men's tournament at T-Mobile Center, basically so they can sell advertising around it. A big deal for them. But to me, speaking of things we agree on, it's a loss for Kansas City, a loss for the Big 12 tournament, because it signals that they will not go back to Municipal Auditorium for the women's tournament the same week as the men, which they should be doing. Is there any way you can get Brett Yormark to change his mind on this?
There is a way that we can get Brett Yormark, who is an exceptional leader, one of my favorite people to work with, and I work with a lot of big-time sports people. We need to put more money in the Municipal Auditorium. I'm sure if I called Brett Yormark tomorrow and said we have a $175 million spending plan at Municipal to get the facility, its locker rooms, its ability to generate cash up to the level of the Big 12 needs, and we're going to play in one of the most historic venues in all of college basketball and college sports, he'd be down. We just got to do it. So I'm going to pass around the cup and hope people can spare a dime to get us back. But no, I think more importantly, I could see us looking at bond activity later in the year to make sure that we're adequately invested in convention and entertainment facilities in Kansas City. I want Municipal Auditorium to stick around another 90 years. We need to make sure, like they're doing at Allen Fieldhouse, like I would have loved for them to do at Arrowhead Stadium. Great classic venues deserve preservation, and I think we need to do that with the Municipal.
All right, Mayor Lucas, thank you for the time. As always, appreciate it.
Hey, take care, everybody.
There you go. Quinton Lucas on KCMO.